back and ready to go with match number 1. FroStee versus Glory is going to be kicking it off, Derek. And both these players, I think, have interesting stories from Season 1. So Glory, I think, for most of the season played quite well, as is expected from Glory. But he did start to have some shaky moments, if you remember. He had some moments where there were just strict misplays that happened, some rope burns and then caused some flustering. So, I hope that's been polished up a little bit. I know Glory's way better than, mistakes like that. So I have no doubt that that's going to sharpen up a lot in this season. But also FroStee, I think, as probably the underdog in this region overall for Grandmasters. I think he played very, very well, and I think he impressed a lot. At least impressed me a lot with his Paladin play as well.
I agree. He's also not only been improving himself, but also putting pressure on a lot of other Hearthstone players. Tweeting out recently, players who have been unhappy with their results, he's saying, you know what, why aren't you playing more Hearthstone then? Get on the grind. If you're not doing well enough for your expectations, you've got to work harder. And I think that is FroStee to a T. He realizes he is, I think, frankly, a lot of people would say, pretty fortunate to have got into Grandmasters, given how he doesn't have quite so much tournament pedigree as a lot of the other players. But he's not taking advantage of, or he's not taking advantage of it.
He is taking advantage of the
Not
opportunity.
taking it for granted is what I was trying to say. He is absolutely taking advantage of it to the utmost of his ability, and I'm really, really happy to see that from him, because we know that he's got what it takes, and he just needed to give it his all, which he's doing.
Yeah, and as we do look, basically both players are going to be kicking off with a warrior pick. The FroStee's mage was banned out, and he shielded his hunter. And something we've been seeing as an ongoing theme that has genuinely surprised me, but I'm probably just wrong about all this. And Glory shielded his warrior and had his priest deck banned out, and we saw priest get some explosive wins. Yeah, it's Taunt Warrior Mirror, or like Control Warrior Mirror, I guess. You've seen it. You've seen most of it yesterday, especially if you watch some of the other regions as well.
Yes.
But yeah, speaking to FroStee at the summit, which was held just after the World Championships here in Taipei, and when I was interviewing him, talking to him, he was like, although he's a very jokey kind of guy, he's a fun guy to be around. When talking about the opportunity and how he was going to approach it, he was like, "Oh, I'm pretty serious about this because this is such a big opportunity for someone who, like you said, doesn't have a look at Kalento, Tice in terms of names and history of Hearthstone, and then FroStee is relatively new, but he did earn his spot through being the top, one of the top point turners. So I'm pretty excited to see what he does in Season 2.
Me too. He's a deceptive character, I would say, FroStee. When you talk to him, he's just very laid back, very relaxed, which kind of makes you forget he works really hard. Like he says in his interview, like he's is it Taekwondo that he's a black belt in or something?
Something like that.
Some martial
that
art
could beat me up.
Basically.
That's all I know.
Yeah. The implication being he is dedicated. He works hard at what he wants to be good at, which is evinced perfectly in his Hearthstone gameplay. Glory on the other side, where we've been talking mostly about FroStee. Like you said, strong start to Grandmasters, was in contention to qualify through to the playoffs right up until the end in Division B, but he just couldn't get there because it felt like, to me, I don't know, the pressure was kind of getting to him. He needs to just calm down, take it nice and easy. And to be honest, I wouldn't be too surprised to see a repeat of that this season, where he does well at the start and maybe is feeling the pressure later on and starts to fumble. Hopefully for him, though, he can really lock down his skill that we know he has and play well throughout.
Yeah, well, let's get into game number 1, because these players already have. It's Warrior Mirror. Both players having access to Dr. Boom on 7 for now. Soon, that won't be the case. But in this game, it's looking fairly even. I think both players are just going through the motions and kind of mirroring each other at this point, which FroStee was just laughing at. And also, what baffles me the most about this game so far, FroStee, if you don't know, is Australian. He's wearing a coat. I didn't know they existed in a country that hot.
That's what's grabbing your attention.
Yeah, it is. Why is he wearing a coat?
I don't know. Maybe he's feeling a bit frosty.
Hey, I get it. Air conditioning on full blast.
Yeah.
Just to make use of the coat.
Get a coat. I spent a lot of money on this. But already, I want to talk about something really interesting, because you were talking about this kind of matchup having been played in other regions in Hearthstone Grandmasters. It was. Last night, I caught a bit of the matchup between Bunny Hopper and Casey, coincidentally just before I fell asleep. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact it was a Warrior Mirror. Where they both were playing Control Warrior Mirror. They both had Shield Block on turn 3. Neither of them played it. they both held back and just went for hero power on turn 2. I believe they both played it at a later point, if I remember correctly. So it wasn't purely to not draw cards, because again, you know, this is primarily a fatigue matchup. A lot of the time it's going to go very, very long, and you want as many cards in your deck as possible. But it does just show already the difference in the playstyles for these players, where these guys both going hard at it, just trying to get through their deck as quick as possible to get Elysiana down.
Yeah, it was very interesting, wasn't it? Because I was watching Swids yesterday, and it was Swids and Calento.
I think you're right.
And they were playing the mirror like old Control Warrior mirror, where you just tried not to play stuff and force your opponent to be on full cards.
Yeah.
So they had to, you know, when you had to do stuff like just Whirlwind back in the day, just to get a card out of your hand and things like that. And they were doing that, and that actually surprised me. I'm no Control Warrior aficionado at all, but I didn't think, especially with Boom available and some of the other tools that have been added to the deck, that you needed to play that slowly in the mirror. But I mean, these players are playing relatively fast as far as I'm concerned, but it's just interesting to see such a difference in philosophy, isn't it?
For sure, because
I don't even know which one's right.
Well, I would say that in modern Warrior theory, at least in Bomb Warrior, which was the premier deck through Season 1 of Hearthstone Grandmasters, the general thinking was you just want to play your threats out as quick as possible. Like, you want to play it as a tempo matchup a lot of the time, because eventually your opponent will run out of resources. I wonder if with this new switch over to Taunt Control Warrior, if we're calling it that, with the Armadillo, Tomb Wardens, and Frightened Flunkies, you play it more slowly. I would guess, however, that you generally still want to play nice and aggressive, get chip damage through to face, which is exactly what Glory's doing. This has all been spot on so far.
Yeah, because as far as I understand it, outside of exactly the bombs, the curve isn't that much worse. It's not that much worse.
Yeah,
it's a bit worse, but it's not that bad. So you can generally have roughly the same game plan. You're going to be down 5 damage here and there from bombs or lack of bombs. But yeah, I would have definitely played it like this and not played it like Swids, Calento, Casey Bunny.
And again, those are entirely different, could have been entirely different situations. I wasn't especially closely watching.
There's only so much attention span we have after casting like 6 hours of Hearthstone and then going back late at night to watch more Hearthstone.
Yeah.
We try our best.
Glory's play here, very interestingly, heading into turn 7 for FroStee, I think pretty clearly denied a play of Dr. Boom, because he had 2 Snip Snaps on a Dynamatic, nice big minion. If you just play Dr. Boom, all the armor you gained is shredded through instantly, so I liked FroStee's play of going for the Mummy instead. This turn, it becomes a little bit more interesting and speaks very, very clearly to what we were talking about tempo. How do you play this matchup? Because I would say Dr. Boom there was a very safe play on turn 8. He could have even traded in all the minions 1 for 1 if he wanted. Instead, however, he pushes face, plays the Tomb Wardens, and forces out a Brawl.
And this is the part of the game I don't understand, right? Because yes, it's forced out a Brawl, so Glory has not done much. He did get to press hero power though, right? Is Glory actually having a decent board to Brawl actually just fine for Glory? Like, do you want Brawl in your hand in this matchup? You know, is it like, oh, I've got Brawl and you've not now? It's like, well, how often does Warrior go that wide?
Right.
So maybe it's a positive for Glory, which then just confuses me even more.
Very arguably. You know, I think we could have seen there from FroStee, instead of trading the minions, instead of going face with his 4 robots there, the microbots, sorry, he could have traded 1 for 1, right? Just clear up the board. There were 4 on each side, then play the Tomb Wardens and have 2 relatively beefy minions, which pre-turn 10, when Mega Devastator comes online, fairly difficult to deal with, I would say.
Yeah, I think when realistically the best your opponent can do is match you and play their own, then you'll always end up ahead, although I guess Glory has Rush on it, which, again, we'll ask this question, and I think it was one of the first things Sol and Admirable discussed when their first game was a Warrior Mirror. They were like, why is this card a mech? It's just exactly what we said. Nobody knows, and I don't think we'll ever will. And more into this game, though, this is where things start getting a little bit weird, I think, when your opponent has like 4 to 5 damage on the board.
Do you just tank it every turn?
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because do you want to use removal? I think the hero power is very fortunate here for FroStee, because it's just a nice, cheap way to deal with a lot of this. But that's a weapon swing.
Yeah.
And then the hero power kills 1, which then leaves a few minions on his side. But I feel like they're just having a wet noodle fight right now. It's very, very strange.
And this is one of the things I always harp on about in these kind of Control Warrior mirrors, or any kind of control mirror, is when you have, well, actually, specifically with Control Warrior mirrors, when you have Dr. Boom active, your minions generally are removal spells as well, because they're mostly mechs, and therefore they all have rush. They can just take out anything your opponent plays.
Okay, then.
But your removal spells cannot also function as minions.
As a minion, yeah.
Right, exactly.
That
So
would
you
be
need to be
OP.
careful. If you just use all your minions to remove the spells every time, to remove their minions every time, eventually you're left with a handful of, double Brawl and Plague of Wrath. That's not what FroStee wants. At the end of this, constant mid-game skirmish where they're trading back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, he wants to be left with minions to close out lethal damage at the end of the game. So for FroStee here in particular, given that he's got 2 Brawls and a Plague of Wrath in hand, at some point, I want him to try and transition over into using them effectively for removal rather than his minions.
Yeah, and this was my point earlier, in that Glory getting to Brawl was actually probably
Excellent
a good
point.
thing.
Yeah, exactly,
Because Glory has one more space in his hand. He's not got a Brawl clogging it
Yeah.
up, and it wasn't a bad Brawl. It was pretty solid. It's not like he brawled a board of
Yeah.
1-1s. He brawled the Tomb Wardens. Like, that's just good.
If you see it as just a straight up trade, like I discard a Brawl, my opponent discards a Tomb Warden, probably happy on the Brawl side.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's reactive, it will only be good some of the time, whereas Tomb Warden is good all of the
Okay,
time.
then.
It's obviously not quite so... I'm being a bit reductionist there in my argument, but the
But
point
generally,
comes
though,
across.
like I think overall that is the case, And this is a pretty simple turn for FroStee if he wants it. The benefit of not only the hero power, but it's a good dynamatic target, one of the few outside of post Elysiana gameplays.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I was looking at something else, like you swing with the Super Collider, hero power, and then you could magnetize a Ziliax on just to get more immediate damage. Or we could see just 2 Warden then as well, if you want to push as much kind of pressure forward as possible.
You could go both ways actually and go trade with the 1-1s to kill off the mummy, and then just dynamatic, and then put a Ziliax on top of one of the minions as well.
Interesting here. FroStee making... It's interesting how history repeats itself. He makes basically the same play where he plays a Tomb Warden when he has a bunch of microbots in play. Last time, he could have sacrificed them off, didn't, got met with a Brawl. This time, it feels like he is afraid of the Brawl, because he could have just gone with a hero power, a weapon swing to take out the 2 minions and push the 3 microbots face. But this time he wants to get rid of them, to not play around
It's so
Brawl.
tricky, isn't it? Because the earlier swing of the weapon, I did not like.
Yeah.
Like, used a swing of a Super Collider to kill a 2-2 and a 1-1.
I really didn't mind it, to be honest.
I thought in this matchup, when it comes down to big clunky mechs late
Fair.
game, that felt like a waste. And that's why I liked him not using it now. I thought you can clear the board so easily that I mean, look at this turn now instead. Like, something a bit more can be done. He can hit in and then hero power or something to clear the board. This
I
isn't the
see what you
perfect
mean.
one, but this feels way more valuable than killing a 2-2 and a 1-1.
It's interesting though, because I feel like I disagree with you on both points, because I think that the time to use Super Collider is when you're getting chip damage through to face. Like, that's an underrated aspect of this mirror, I think, is, if you get through to the late game and you've chipped their armor total away, it really starts to add up. And so I think on that turn, using the weapon swing and getting the 3 microbots to face, it's less insignificant than you would think. And there's then still 3 1-1s in play, which obviously relatively easy for the warrior to clear up. But if they use another Brawl there, it's only really on 1 minion.
I do enjoy the fact we have very different opinions on this.
It's super complicated, and this is what a couple of the players were tweeting out. Like Casey, when he was up against Bunny Hopper, he was saying, first 2 games of the series, mage stuff happened. You can't really do anything about that. It was kind of unfortunate that it had to happen to him, or I can't remember the exact specifics, but he got pretty unlucky. Last game, however, Bomb Warrior, or the Warrior Mirror, really interesting. Goes on for ages, a lot of different decisions to be made. And I think the introduction of the mech package, the Taunt package with Frightened Flunky, Armageddillo, and
changes
Tomb Warden
things.
really makes an interesting dynamic with aggression versus defense.
And the fact that, I know Sotta was talking about yesterday in Grandmasters, was that the fact that Flunky can not only discover the Armageddillo because it's a warrior card, but discover itself favorably because it's a warrior card is insane.
It is insane.
I've literally had 1 make 3 in total, and it's sick. Like, it's like, oh, spare cards to play in this value-based matchup.
It's insane. It's like Ghostlight Angler with Taunt, and the extra copy doesn't go away at the end of the turn.
Yeah.
Except nothing really like that. Sort of would hate me for comparing it to that
It's
card.
like that card, apart from all of these many different things.
Yeah, it feels like that way sometimes. And my feelings are valid.
Okay, so while we've been chatting along about the do's and don'ts in our opinions of Warrior matchups, the game has, I feel, stabilized for both players to the point where it's very much okay.
Yeah.
Use just enough resources to make your opponent react, and that's it, no more. And you really want to just eke out as much value as possible.
This is the way it is in Warrior Mirrors.
Yeah.
It's like all roads lead to Rome, all game states lead to eventually board is clear, you're both at a high health total. It doesn't matter how you got there, this is generally what you're looking at the vast majority of the time.
Yeah, something really nutty has to happen for like a game to snowball in this matchup.
Exactly.
I actually think the biggest turn I've experienced in the mirror is the Devastator with a Ziliax attachment onto it turn. And if your opponent can't answer it, because it has, and it holds a Divine Shield, if it can't answer it, then that's like a real problem. That pushes for a lot of damage.
Glory here with an interesting conundrum where FroStee obviously turboed out his Tomb Wardens fairly aggressively, which I do not think is necessarily a mistake at all. But there is, however, a very clear downside to that line of play, which is you've used up minions for Omegadillo to buff, which is a huge tempo swing in your favor if you can activate that. Glory, however, had what I would say was another relatively easy turn, or the best thing he could have done that turn was Tomb Warden by quite a margin. He chose to hold it back though, and I would imagine that is in no small part due to wanting to get that value off of our Megadillo, which is, again, a different way to take the matchup, more optimistic, I suppose, and less aggressive.
Speaking of which,
and it's going to work out for him.
It's going to be rewarded as well, because not only is Tomb Warden in hand, but so is Ziliax.
Oh, yes.
And if you hit those two things, even if it's just one Tomb Warden and the Ziliax, you know what? That is often worth.
I actually wonder if Glory will try and clear space for the Omega Assemblies. Oh, actually, I think he's got 2 Omega Assemblies in his hand on the left-hand side, the first and third card. Because there's a reasonable chance that you find a taunt off of that, with obviously Tomb Warden being number 1.
How does he do it, though?
Well, something like, I don't know, Mega Devastator, Ziliax, or like Shield Slam. And
do you really not want to buff Ziliax?
Yeah, I guess that's.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's just a consideration.
I agree with the Omega Devastator, but maybe this is better. Like, just use a Warpath and just be like, whatever. I use Warpath, maybe Devastator as well, just to do it.
And this is what I think Glory has overall done better so far, which is to, as I said, he uses his removal spells as removal, and he's using his minions as threats, which I think is pretty clearly evinced that he has, you know, a hand that is chock full of value and minions when you factor in the 2 Omega Assemblies as well. Whereas FroStee has, you know, a bit of pressure, but his hand's pretty lackluster in terms of threats.
Yeah, it's weak. All you've got to look at is the mana cost of Glory's hand versus the mana cost of Frostee's.
Yeah,
exactly. There's a large difference there.
Especially as the Omega Assemblies probably equal about 15 mana each in terms of expenditure.
And now you've got to keep noting that there's 2 brawls in Frostee's hand.
Yep, which
and they're
does
still
mean,
there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, it's kind of a positive and a negative, because it means he hasn't found a good use for them so far, but it also means he's still got them. If Glory is able to utilize his minion advantage to swing the board in his favor, Brawl can come down to quickly swing things back.
I swear FroStee'd love a plot twist right about now. If he was also Warlock. But it'd be sick, wouldn't it?
I suppose. You'd love a Dead Man's Hand too, while we're at it.
Yeah, that's true.
Would that be insane if you could play Dead Man's Hand and Plot Twist in the same deck? I don't know what happened.
I know you think it's super like, wait, what?
Like dividing by 0.
So there's Tomb Warden, which means there's some level of committal, and it's also one of the more powerful targets for the Armageddillo, because it's very similar to how Saronite Chain Gang used to work. The buff happens on them both. It's basically a huge Saronite Chain Gang of old. not the new one.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised to see this from Gloria. I thought, not even necessarily that I think it's wrong, it's just inconsistent with what we've seen from him so far. I would have expected him to go for a slightly greedier route by getting the buff first, then throwing them down.
I think that was a fair question of, if FroStee's doing nothing, can he deal with just 2 Morden played? Like, as you said, chip damage is kind of king. And if these aren't cleanly answered, where he gets another 6 damage next turn.
Very good point. Yep, definitely something to consider.
And he's got to empty his hand somehow, right? Like, look at his hand. How does he empty it?
But he could have just played the Omega Dillo. Like, it was fine.
I thought it was fine. I think I would have played it on the original turn, to be honest.
I
would have just been like,
that was very
you know
valid.
what?
Yeah.
Poof, I'll take it. Now the old, hi Omega Devastator you can Omega Devastator me, and whoever laughs last wins.
It's like laser beam tennis.
Time for a master plan.
I'd really like to know for Glory what his short-term game plan is. Short-term game plan is like, what is he trying to set up? I would guess something like a Mega Assembly. Trying to find a taunt to go with the Omega Dillo. Doesn't find it, but gets a decent suite of mechs as well.
I mean, those, if you give me those every time, I'd be extremely happy with Warrior player.
I think just getting any Warrior mech is generally better. Like, they're just slightly better than the average neutral mech.
And also, you can do funny things with the Sentry as well, right?
True. Especially, well, yeah, he's got the 2 buffed Warrior cards from Rise of the Mechs, with an extra attack and an extra health, respectively.
This could be where the game starts to slip as well for FroStee, because if these mechs aren't cleaned up, and then Glory can drop Beryllium, like, that is a hefty punch, and then Beryllium gets tough to deal with. So we might now look at this brawl. The brawl come down, and FroStee can almost certainly, because there's only 3 health. Can certainly clear the board if he chooses to. Maybe he just runs the Scrap Hound in.
Scrap Hound hero power doesn't seem too bad. It dies to the hero power from Glory, but
yeah, if you're making your opponent press it.
Yeah, I think like you definitely want to get higher value out of Ziliax, and you probably want to press the hero power as well. I mean, yeah, just leaving it is also probably fine.
Until the Beryl.
Does the Beryllium come down now? It goes to 10 health, and I think you can afford to be a little bit more optimistic to make it survive a Devastator hit.
So
he's already seen one Devastator.
My additional question is, is any other play other than Beryllium really that decent? This is sick. Like, he has to have Devastator.
I agree this was good. Yeah. This is like a strong play. I'm just wondering if he could have been... Like, imagine if he got this on the Security Rover. If he played Rover this turn and then tried to magnetize the Beryllium onto it, that's insane.
Yeah, from my experience, if you have Beryllium, I think as soon as you can land it on something that can attack, you do it more often than not, because suddenly it's, okay, you play the Rover, does it live? No, it doesn't. Okay, now you're going to play another mech, does it live? Because Beryllium's such high mana cost, you can't often do a lot with it in the same turn.
One of the main things we haven't even talked about so far that will be working in Glory's favor is the fact that he has 2 Omega Assemblies, whereas FroStee is only running 1 copy in his deck. Which, as we can clearly see, is not going to be working in his favor, because while he has managed to do a decent job of accruing a little bit of pressure, he's got, or at least minion presence, he can throw this stuff onto the board and be in a decent position. I'd say overall, Glory is still looking pretty far in the lead in terms of minion development. It's really just cards in deck that Glory is falling behind on.
And now, there can be some nice things that happen.
However, it's worth pointing out that one of FroStee's cards is a bomb in his deck because of the Clockwork Goblin that was played. So it's 5 versus 6, and then FroStee will draw down to effectively 5 cards next turn. So it's very, very close in terms of cards.
I'm kind of surprised at that attack.
What were you expecting, a trade?
No, I thought it was just, well, at least maybe I'm too aggressive. I think I would have just devastated the 3/4 and then just stuck Ziliax on that Beryllium and been like, let's go. You know, because how does that, outside of a second brawl, how does that die?
That's fair.
And if it lives through the brawl, you just win the game. Still, don't get me wrong, this is not a bad board.
Yeah, I don't know, Ziliax I think might be... Would he like to save it to go for a strong trade when he gets the Divine Shield or maybe a high attack minion? I think both were pretty fine here.
I just imagine
he's taking it very slow though.
An 8/11 with Divine Shield and Lifesteal and untargetable is
That
like,
does not
how
die
does
easily.
that die?
Yeah,
It's insane.
it's true.
Because it's even awkward for it's actually hard for a Devastator to kill
Yeah,
it
it'd have
because
to be
the
like
Divine
Warpath
Shield and it's got
Devastator.
11.
Yeah.
So you'd still need to trade the Devastator in?
Yeah.
Like, it's insane. One of the few minions you can create that can take a Devastator hit.
Oh, I love that fuse thing.
Frosty's definitely on the back foot here. Big time. Now you already see this Dynamatic is going to be used to just clear the 2-3 that he had to make by pinging down the Rover.
And we were talking about chip damage being important. Man, has this Beryllium Nullifier for Glory been huge.
Hey, look at this now. Hero power the 3-2. Boom, Ziliax go. 1 minion. It's not even realistically brawlable.
Yeah, it's pretty much... Like, Warpath and Devastator is a pretty good answer to it.
But the Devastator still dies as well, though.
Well, because you go double Warpath and then...
Oh,
Devastator.
sorry. That's the money.
Or Warpath Hero
Yeah,
Power.
yeah.
But, you know,
Still,
he
though.
clearly doesn't have the Devastator in hand, I think, as it currently stands. So Glory can make a pretty good read that it's not there. Or,
Hey.
on the other hand, we could just see our Mega Dillo, right?
I was
Because
going to say that, yeah.
our
why
Mega
not?
Dillo Hero Power puts him in a situation where a Brawl is still fine because one of 2 good minions survives, and it sets up for powerful plays in coming turns.
It's kind of a funny turn. It lowers the health of the Beryllium, but the only thing you bothered about was Devastator, which it was within reach of anyway.
True.
But it's gaining so much armor now because that is an Eternium Rover there. Which means that look at the health
point,
difference.
yeah.
It's
It's pretty stark.
insane. And if you're not above 10, you may as well be at 7. That common phrase.
This place is scary.
FroStee still has not found his Omega Dillo. So Infested Goblin has a little bit of added synergy there, I suppose, given that it adds the Scarabs with Taunt back to his hand. So I can see why you'd go for that one.
Yep. One of the cool little combos there's a deck that's actual Taunt Warrior. And it's one of the nice combos you can do. That and the 1-mana buff your Taunt cards.
Into the fray.
Is really nice with this 2-3.
Yeah. That card is sick. I definitely underrated that as a card. I think it will find its spot at some point.
It's also, you just imagine a world where Warrior doesn't need it, but imagine just a world where Zoo gets better and better, and then you have a 2-3 Death Round to 2-1-1 Taunt in your hand. Like, that's just good. Like,
good,
it's
yeah.
pretty solid.
Glory, again, able to get the damage through Face. I think this is such... In his list of priorities, I'm really glad that the face damage seems to be very high up the list.
The distance between them two is getting further and further, isn't it?
Big time.
He's not only gaining a lot of armor now with the bomb going off, but he's also pushing his opponent down under pressure, turn and turn again. It's a very well-played game so far from Glory.
Exactly, and Glory has had multiple opportunities to play into a brawl, and he has played around it pretty much every time, because I think he realizes, first of all, how good of a position he's in at this point, so he's allowed to play around certain cards, which Brawl is very, very likely to be in hand at this point. And he's doing that very well, whilst still getting the chip damage through, because again, he realizes how important that is.
And look how absurd this Beryllium Nullifier has been. It's what, hit phase 2-3 times, gained tons of armor,
It's been
and
absolutely nuts.
just taken 2 hits from that the Tomb Warden.
That was the play of the game for sure from Glory, because I was not convinced on that play at all at the time. I was thinking maybe you can go a bit more optimistic, try and find a better outcome, and get above Devastator range. It's just worked out so gorgeously for Glory.
I think the best thing about it is it was a generated mech, and if it did get devastated, I think that was like Devastator number 2 anyway. So you'd be like, oh well, it's annoying, but it's almost a 1-drop got devastated there, which you're okay with.
And it's just so interesting as we see this game develop, getting to see, again, I think a good way of phrasing it is Glory's like list of priorities. How highly does he rate different aspects of the game? And I thought at first that getting a good Armadillo was like #1 on his list because of the way he was playing, holding back the Tomb Wardens, saving them for the Armadillo. But it seems pretty clear now, face damage is by far and away his #1 priority, and I think that's pretty spot on.
It's very telling of his approach to the matchup.
Yeah, and look what it's given him so far.
Yeah, I mean, again, personally, someone would have had to have taken the mouse off me to not Armadillo that turn.
Right.
Because it was a Tomb Warden, a Ziliax, and the Ogre as well.
Yeah.
It's like, that's insane.
I don't think it was the Ogre at that point.
It was last turn.
Oh, last turn. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
last turn, he could have just
Oh,
not done
last
that turn and played
Ah,
it.
okay.
It was Ziliax, Tomb Warden, and the Ogres in hand.
Right, I thought you meant a few turns.
No,
ago.
no, no. Like, just
I liked
then.
the Tomb Warden a fair bit last
This
time.
would be a good
Just because
time
it gets
for a
that damage
master
through to
play.
face. And
Yeah.
the Armadillo's still pretty insane.
Well, I think the turn was still good. It's just myself would have struggled to go, look at these 3 minions I have in hand that's going to get
Understandable,
buffed.
yeah.
Like, I just play one of these every single turn for the rest of the game and win. Like,
Well, I
this
mean-
feels so insane.
I think if you and I were playing this matchup, Armadillo wouldn't have been in hand last time.
Yeah,
we would have played it like
true.
10 turns ago.
Yep. Here we go.
Almost out of cards.
One positive thing is the interaction now of the 3-drop mech along with Ziliax. You put those together and they're both buffed. That's a massive health Ziliax.
Whew.
That's
And
what,
watch
is it,
out
11
Enforcer
health?
as well. Like,
Yeah.
what is that now? A 4-14?
Yeah. For aim at it. Divine Shield.
With Divine Shield.
Oh.
What? That would take like something rushing in, Devastator, and the Devastator rushing in to be able to kill it off.
That's it. I'm out of cards.
Pretty nuts.
Glory's out of cards, but honestly, if there's ever a safe turn to play... yeah, there we go. I was going to say, to play Elysiana. Because
agree.
the problem here is normally you're under threat. If you go into Fatigue first, your opponent's got you under threat, so Elysiana's a bit tough. It's a 1-2 on the board against him.
Wow, these are some pretty premium options. Goodness.
Wow.
the Armadillo as well.
Wow. That is one of the best Elysiana
What was
runs.
that? Boom Reaver, Leroy,
Gorehowl.
Gorehowl, Armadillo, and one other option as well.
But there was even like...
The heavy metal's insane. That's just 6
yeah.
mana 10 drops.
And there was even a Security Rover was in there. Like, the other options were good.
Were nuts as well,
Warmaster
yeah.
Vroon as well, if it would have got a Dragon, but just the potentially high-value cards almost every single pick. It's insane.
Pretty nuts.
When I Elysiana, I just get offered, like, Iron Beak Owl.
Goldshire Footman, be quiet. Actually, Goldshire Footman wouldn't have even been that bad
Wait,
to be buffed by the Armadillo.
Did he pick Leroy?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
Boom
there you
Reaver
go.
into Leroy.
I love the minute of Dark going, yeah, he picked it. Oh, wait!
Oh! Glory just like,
Okay.
yep.
Oh, wow. Oh. I was like, wait a minute.
And now, for Glory, obviously face damage here with the Leroy is correct. His #1 priority now, moving up the list, I think should be making Elysiana as terrible of a play as
Yeah, don't
possible.
let him play him.
Exactly. Like, if he wants to play Elysiana here,
He dies.
go for it. Exactly. Tank this damage, I dare you.
And this is the whole difference, right? Look at the difference of like, oh well, you know, Glory hit Fatigue first. Who cares? Because Glory got Elysiana down, like 100% safe. It was against a 1-2, and FroStee, on the other hand, like you said, just can't play. He's going to be able to heal a lot with the Scrap Hound Ziliax.
Yeah.
But once this is dead, which it just is already, that's it for FroStee. And FroStee's shaking his head. He's like, well, I think I'm just done. And I don't blame him. I don't even know what he can do now. Because I think just already, even in hand, there's enough for Glory to probably win the game. Never mind
All the extras
the
got in his
deck.
deck. And, you know, FroStee does still have Elysiana. He could discover himself a pretty good series of minions or spells to wrestle him out of this one. But I agree, it's looking good. What I
You
would
will
give
die, Scrap Hound.
for a Raven voice pack for
Oh,
Hearthstone.
that'll be so sick.
Fatigue!
I would actually, listen, I want him to charge. I will do
I
that
will
for
pay
free.
you.
Yeah, you know what?
Please, I need this right now.
That would be so sick. Just don't tell me how people download it, because it would hurt my feelings to see one and it's just me.
Just chuckling. Good on Raven. So now with a double buff from 2 Armadillos, these taunts are so swole. Is that a 6-16 Moshog now?
Yes. Then it's a, what, 7-6 Ziliax? And that is a, what, is it a 5-9?
It's like a 5, yeah. Something stupid.
Good. Well, that's a good Elysiana though.
Yeah,
the Elysiana did happen. It's
yeah.
only facing down 2 attacks.
Shield block might have been the best one there, even though it gets you closer to fatigue. Assembly's fantastic.
Oh.
Scrap Hound, I think, has got to be
Is
the
it?
pick.
Maul Strike's not a bad card. It's just spot removal.
Scrap Hound's got Rush and it gains you health though. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Baleful.
Banker?
Banker Elysiana, not like this.
It never happens. That never happens. Could you
Just
imagine?
the stall in the air, that never happens.
I had to convince myself halfway
No,
through
that was
that,
just
'cause
so
I'm like, sometimes that definitely happens.
Wait. It could happen.
Off the top. No way.
Come on, Dark said it never happens. Let me prove him wrong. Oh. Okay, now, Elysiana, you just need to survive another turn.
Yeah, somehow I'll find that a little bit
Yeah,
unbelievable.
the 6-18 might... Oh.
All right, come on,
Elysiana with this roll. Let's
beat
go.
up this Enforcer.
And the second Scarab to protect it.
The thing is, even if FroStee had like 1,000 more cards in his deck, he'd probably still die.
It's beside the point. You said it never happens.
It could happen.
Oh. How does he kill it outside of Brawl?
Well, he's got Bronze Gatekeeper plus Gorehowl.
Oh, he could just... Yeah, he could also gatekeep Ziliax if he really wants
Sure,
to. He's probably
yeah.
going to keep all the Ziliax. I forgot the Bronze Gatekeeper
There
was
we
a
go.
3-mana 5-9 with Rush and Taunt. That old thing.
Ah, the dream is dead.
Along with the dream.
Now FroStee needs to try and wrestle something. I guess victory from the jaws of defeat, but it is looking more and more grim. That is a
Dark,
pretty good selection of
that
mechs,
never
though.
happens.
Yeah, that it does never happen anymore.
The Gorehowl, you know, can clear off this 5-6, but it's 5 more damage, and then
Yeah.
FroStee knows that there's tons more damage
He
coming
knows
his way
there's
as
2
well.
more Leroys in the deck. Yeah.
And there's also 9 damage just displayed right now.
A Mega Assembly probably gearing up to heavy armor, I guess. Like, he wants to use that while he still has armor, I think.
Oh, Devastator. Nice.
Wow.
Oh, get the underpowered Steambot. Unpowered, sorry, I think it is. I just always call it underpowered. Into Ziliax, so it's like 1,000,000 health.
We could just buff it straight up with the Armadillo.
Oh yeah, he discovered it, didn't he?
Well, that's a mech off the heavy metal to be magnetized onto with Ziliax. Not bad at all. And it represents lethal.
All bad things.
Okay. A Mega Assembly. Something could happen here. Those are not bad.
A very solid Omega Assembly, but I still think not
solid enough. Yeah.
Whoa, whoa. Does he not need to ping Maul Strike this? And just play a 3-drop?
He's just dead to Gorehowl then if he does that. I mean, I think he's dead no matter what.
Well, that... yeah.
Wow.
I think this is correct, you know, because your 2 Moderns just get chomped up anyway.
Fair enough.
So you may as well try and just
Hope the second
What if
Gorehowl's
Glory
there?
doesn't have the second Gorehowl and has just a whatever minion, and then you can 2 Warden, and then you can build on top of that. I think, although we can see he's obviously just dead, I think that was actually a better play. Because it puts
yes.
FroStee in so much of a better position if he doesn't just die this turn.
Gives him a chance, but at the end of a very long, grueling game in which FroStee was honestly on the back foot for the entire thing, finally he is put out of his misery and Glory takes what was a very convincing victory, and I think a well-earned victory. I liked a lot of what we saw there from Glory. I think he had his priorities set out very well. He was using his removal very aggressively so that when it came through to the late game, he just had way more threats.
Yeah, I think most of it was just extremely solid play, and I think there we 100% saw that Glory had a game plan from turn 1. There was no working it out on the fly, was there? He knew exactly how he wanted to play. He stuck to it. And there was some weird plays as far as I'm concerned as well. Like holding the Armageddillo looked very right at the end of the game, but during the game, both of us were just like, oh, I think he could have played it then, he could have played it then, he could have played it then. And he kept hold of it for quite a long time, just using the straight up value of the minions he had. But that was just game number 1, guys. And whether you like Warrior Mirrors or not, I like that game, but I think we all need a little bit of a break. So we'll step away for just a minute while we get game 2 ready. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with some more Grandmasters.
Well played!
What's up, Hearthstone fans? It's TJ Sanders. Welcome to another episode of Well Played. If you've watched competitive Hearthstone in the past, chances are you've heard the casters say something like this.
Is nothing.
Ooh, this is weird.
The game turns around this turn.
But why didn't we play? I guess he wants to. Okay, so I understand what it's Casey's doing.
Conceal information.
Exactly.
At first glance, what you do and don't know in a game of Hearthstone appears to be pretty straightforward. Both players can see everything that happens on the board, and when you see your opponent's class, you can get a good idea of what cards they might have in deck. Information is everything in the tavern. The most valuable information? What's in your opponent's hand. And yet, players of all levels can be prone to certain bad habits that unnecessarily give away that precious info.
I will hunt you. I will hunt you down.
Bad habit number 1, hovering. Whenever you mouse over a card in hand, your opponent can see this as a red outline around the card. Say it's turn 3, you have no minions on board, and your hunter opponent keeps hovering over 2 cards before they settle on playing Animal Companion.
To my side.
Their only other good on-curve play is Master's Call. Based on the hovering, you can get a good idea of where the Master's Call would be in hand. Bad habit number 2, pointing. Whenever you target minions on board with effects from hand, your opponent will see a red arrow indicating your intended target, even if you don't end up casting the card. For example, you see the red arrow as your rogue opponent uses a card from the far left to target their own evil miscreant before the end turn. They just gave you 2 bits of information. 1, they have a card in hand that targets minions, and 2, it's likely to be Shadow Step because you're playing against Rogue. Generally, bad habits like these can be avoided by planning out your entire turn in advance. Try not to hover over or point with any cards until you know the entire sequence of actions for that turn. Bad habit number 3, playing the wrong copy of a card. Though this is usually a habit born of forgetfulness, it's something that top players should try to optimize. The meta these days is rife with cards that generate other cards. Every once in a while, especially when you can discover, you end up with additional copies of cards you already run in your deck. Cards like these tend to be more valuable because your opponent can rarely account for them. When I play Cyclone Mage or Tempo Rogue, I often find myself asking, wait, which one of these started in my deck again? Unlike the history bar, where generated cards played are labeled with created by, nothing in your hand has such a label. If you're forgetful like me, here's a pro tip. Use golden cards. A golden Shimmerfly would also produce a golden Deadly Shot, and when you run into a memory block, all you need to remember is, save the shiny one. Bad habits can be hard to break, but if you consciously remind yourself of these simple solutions, you'll be reading hands like a Grandmaster in no time.
Well played!
We are marching through our first match of the day, and it's FroStee versus Glory. Glory currently 1-0 up with a win on his Warrior, which again he did shield, which means that if you're new to the format, you basically protect one of your classes, which means you can always play it if you want to, and then another class gets banned a little bit later on. But he did protect his warrior, which means it was safe. Played it in game 1, took a win in the mirror, and now we're on game 2, where I believe he's going to be queuing his mage deck, which is Reno Mage, going up against FroStee's Paladin, and maybe not the Paladin FroStee's known for.
That's right. At Masters Tour Seoul, he was pretty pleased with himself, at least at the start of the tournament, with his build of OTK Shivala Paladin, which included no new cards at all in all 3 of his primary, secondary, and tertiary decks, of course, using the specialist format. Unfortunately for him, did not work out, didn't face the mages he was looking to in that tournament, which is where that deck really shined. I imagine one of the reasons he wishes he would be playing that deck right now, up against the Reno Mage for Glory. I think that this Murloc Paladin is still in with a pretty good shot. You can go very nice and aggressive early on, which the Mage struggles with, but it doesn't feel anywhere near as dominant as the OTK Shivala Paladin.
Yeah, and just taking a quick look at this Reno Mage from Glory is about as standard as you are going to get right now. Everything's in there that you'd expect from the Lunar Pocket Galaxy, the Highlander cards like Reno and Zephyrus, of course. And then you've got your mixture of freeze effects, your big minions to help with some Conjurer's Call in as well. And then you've got your puzzle box of Yogg-Saron. Honestly, whatever opinions people have about RNG in the game, that card I do enjoy. I actually do enjoy that card quite a lot.
The puzzle box.
Yeah, maybe on my own there.
Me too. I think it can lead to some very exciting, very devastating moments. I had a game yesterday where I played it. It played Flark's Boomzooka and pulled out my 3 biggest minions, and they just died, and I lost because of it.
Nice.
Felt pretty bad. FroStee here on his Paladin, bit of a
2 mystery
graphical error,
cards.
it would seem there. I imagine that those are going to be Prismatic Lens and Tip the Scales, as that is really the heart of this deck, because the early Murlocs you're playing on are decent. It's kind of just like a Murloc deck with a lot of neutral Murlocs, which is reasonably strong, but not especially powerful. When you go with the Prismatic Lens, however, bringing Tip the Scales down to 2, maybe even 1 mana if you're lucky, you can then populate the entire board full of Murlocs for very, very cheap and hope that's enough to get the win.
Yeah, and generally, if you know, the way the Murlocs work is they affect each other and buff each other.
Yeah.
So then normally, the game generally goes, 1, yellow's a correct color, because if you like cheese, you'll like this deck. But it basically goes, I will play Tip the Scales, the board is full, my opponent either answers the board in some way, whether that be a freeze, an AoE, or I win the game.
Yes.
And that's literally, honestly, that's pretty much the deck. There is Zephyrus in there for a bit of spice, because you don't summon copies of the minions with Tip the Scales, you actually pull them from the deck, which makes your deck very thin, of course, which then means Zephyrus is more likely to go off. But yeah, generally, as you said, it's aggro up until the Tip the Scales is allowed to be played, whether that be for 2 mana or, you know, the full mana. And then it's all about the opponent. You know, can they answer? No, they're dead. Can they answer? Yes. The Paladin's normally dead at that point.
That's right, also a Chef Nomi thrown in there for empty deck synergy, which is pretty interesting, and I hope we get to see that at some point. Glory here on the other side, however, has got himself in his starting hand with Zephyrus and Reno, I think 3 Mulligan even, the two of the highest win rate cards in the deck, and pretty predictably, especially against Murloc decks, when you can find Hungry Crab every time. It's insane.
Yeah, definitely is. I've got a question for you, though. Although there's Reno and Zephyrus, the rest of the hand, let's not look at the crab for a second, because that doesn't count.
Right.
The rest of the hand kind of sucks.
It was pretty lackluster, yes.
And my question is Reno good enough and Zephyrus to actually take you to late game for these cards to even do anything? Because although Reno's fantastic, it's a board clear most of the time once, and that's it. There's nothing else. So I don't think it was just it's got these. If you have these in your opening hand, you win.
No, definitely not an auto win. I think they are definitely the most likely cards to bridge him over that gap, however. Outside of, you know, arguably Doomsayer might be better if they don't have the Toxfin early on. But I think it was a pretty insane start there for Glory, especially as it's looking like he will very possibly be able to gear up for Barista Lynchen on a Hungry Crab to get another copy on the following turn, which would be frankly insane.
Yeah, and then
always Flame Ward.
You know, yesterday we were talking about cards. I thought, you know, my predictions to what cards would be good. I was on a podcast before the expansion came out, or at least the day into the expansion maybe, and we were talking about Sir Finley, and I was like, oh yeah, so the hero power change effect is actually pretty powerful. I think he'll be played. Yeah.
Yeah. You
I've
weren't
kind
wrong.
of got away with it. It's like just played as a 2-mana 2/3 Murloc.
And
I'm
honestly,
like,
he's pretty good as that.
as soon as I tried Highlander Powder, I was like,
Yeah.
this is bad. But yeah, kind of worked out in the end. I'm happy.
It's pretty funny in a deck that runs both Zephrys and Finley that this is as close as we got to Highlander Paladin, where it runs pretty much only
Two
duplicates,
offs
though.
for the
Yeah.
rest.
Wow, not able to find the... sorry, not able to get the copy of Hungry Crab, which is obviously a little bit unfortunate, but expected. Glory doesn't even opt to play the Luna's Pocket Galaxy on 5, instead thinking it's more valuable for him, having a hand already fairly full of big minions, to just get a 4/5 body in play.
Yeah,
Which
and also
I think
gets
is
the
respectable.
a refresher of the secret later on,
Yeah.
which means maybe another Flame Ward. But also, maybe just mentally preparing for next week.
Yeah,
Couldn't have played Luna next week on 5.
that's true. It's like playing with one hand behind his back.
Fair if you've been playing Mage, in my opinion.
Kind of interesting there, I think, for Glory to not go for the separated snip snaps. I think that's what I would have headed for there. But I guess it makes it slightly harder for the Hungry Finn to trade in.
Yeah,
Tasty Finn.
I think for me as well, the 2 attack is actually annoying versus Murlocs. The Murlocs you want to kill are normally the higher health ones,
Fair.
and maybe Glory doesn't want to ping next turn. You know, maybe he might not have the mana to actually ping off, so having the minion that can just one-shot a wall
Yes.
leader is just a little bit better overall.
I definitely understand that. I think just against Murloc decks, my instinct is generally to just
Yes,
go as
not
wide
be
as
one
possible
wide.
so you can trade against as many things as possible.
He does have approximately 100 attacks with Reno in hand anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Like, this is just a perfect Reno,
Yeah, I
right?
really wouldn't be too surprised to see Reno here.
Oh. So, could be a little bit greedy, but I guess without the Pocket Galaxy online, it doesn't matter. But it would have been actually quite nice to Luna into the key. Is it Keymaster? That's not the name of the card. That's a. I think it fell, isn't it? What's it called? The secret one?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Arcane Keysmith. Is it Keysmith?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't Keymaster from Ghostbusters?
I don't
Are
know. I
you-
haven't
oh,
seen
you're too young-
Ghostbusters in a
too
while. I've
young
seen
for
Ghostbusters. I just don't remember the Keymaster.
Right now, and this is when I called the Murloc deck cheesy earlier. I'm not even joking, because honestly,
it's
if you
cheese
try and
free.
play it straight up as just a Murloc deck, it normally isn't that good because it's not actually built to be played like that.
Yeah.
And if you can't tip the scales early, well, your deck's trash. Like this is what happens, and it's got merit as just a cheesy snipe deck. You know, oh, just grab a quick win. But as we can see, like Glory's winning on board,
Yeah.
has secrets active, has plenty of late game available. Now he's splitting image onto the reborn taunt as well, and he's just won pretty much. I don't want to call it right now, but this would have to
FroStee.
be mind blowing. Tip the scales.
FroStee is just lost, I think, pretty clearly as we can see here, especially as Tortolan program has a decent chance to get Flame Strike or Blizzard.
Well, most importantly, what is it, lethal?
Oh,
Really, anyway. So-
yeah, very
or at least
possibly.
close.
Yeah.
With the 2 reborn as well, so they'll come back.
I think
For 8, 10, 12. This is 12.
13 with the ping. Very, very close. But yeah, I think this deck is the Murloc Royale with cheese.
Yeah. And now there's, so off the top of my head, there's Flame Strike or Blizzard is looking for. Frost Nova does the
Nova,
job
yeah.
too. And this is the problem. And this is why Mage isn't too much of a bad matchup here, because unless the Murlocs come down super early and the Mage can't respond fast enough,
Yes.
well, they have Freeze, they have Nova, they have Flame Strike. All of these things that just go, oh, tip the scales, Flame Strike. I win because that was your whole deck. That's literally what your deck does. So Glory there taking the win 2-0 over FroStee. And yeah, I think a lot of it was just off the back of the Warrior Mirror. Obviously 2 very different games in terms of length.
Oh, yes.
But the Paladin deck, although it looked bad, if it had just drawn a prismatic lens, the game looks very, very different.
Yeah, it
It's
would
tough.
have done indeed. I think even then, there's a reason why this Paladin deck is not very highly represented. I'm not a big fan of this deck at all, the Murloc Paladin deck. I can see what FroStee was going for in a meta game where it's very undecided. Maybe players haven't figured out what the overall strategy is. Aggro is generally good in that sense, but I don't think that this is the aggro deck to go for. I think I would have preferred from FroStee maybe just to see aggro Rogue as his extra added aggro deck, or just the Shavala OTK Paladin instead. I think that was also a very reasonable way to go. But yeah, unfortunately for him, he's going down to a loss in his first week. But for Glory, it's a great way to start things off after a shaky end to Grandmasters Season 1. I think he's definitely going to be getting his mojo back and feeling confident about himself again.
Yeah, especially after the second game, as we said, just kind of played itself to a certain extent. Game 1 definitely did not. So I think Glory, on top of not only winning the match, but winning it in a way you felt good about, I think is a big difference, right? If you can come out of a match and you win, that feels good. But if you come out of the match, watch it back and go, oh, okay, I actually played pretty well, then that is like great. Keep doing that, and you're gonna do pretty well going forward. But